With this video, I would like to complete a series on the general history of socialism in Czechoslovakia. The situation in the Czechoslovak Republic began to deteriorate in the second half of the 1980s. The USSR, which had previously ensured the stability of socialism in Europe, itself began to actively imitate the events of 1968 in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic. And this destroyed the first pillar of a Husák's government. When the political crisis began in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, USSR simply did nothing. The second pillar was formal, but still real support from the population. When the communists took power in 1948, their clear goal was to build socialism and later a communist society. At the end of the 1980s, the socialism society had been formally built for 20 years, and communism has become for the majority of the party and population only a nice wish for future generations and not a real goal. So what did hold socialism in the eyes of the Czechoslovak citizens? Promises of Husák's government about better lives, which was largely true. The Czechoslovak Republic had the best quality of life from the socialist bloc. But there were two problems. First is that compared to the 50s and 60s, when the economy grew very fast and life for the general population improved rapidly and significantly, in the 80s the economy stagnated and the growth of quality of life did not change much. And the second problem was that neoliberal tendencies were just beginning to emerge in the West. And life in the West at that time was much better than it is today, when neoliberalism brought down the quality of life in the West for the working class, not to mention the East. As a result, the argument for a better quality of life in the late 80s essentially stopped working, and this destroyed the second pillar. During the years 1987 to 1998, there was an exchange of people in leading positions in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic. Husák handed over the position of first secretary to Miloš Jakeš, but he still remained president. Ladislav Adamec became the prime minister of the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic instead of Štrougal. The new government adopted a course to rebuild the economy. It was essentially a matter of readopting the 1968 action program, mainly a private business permit. However, this reconstruction did not even begin because the main reforms were not to take place until several years later, but at that time there were already completely different people with different plans in the lead of a state. There was also a plan to make a new institution, but this project was not completed either. As early as 1988, against the background of the events in the Eastern Bloc and in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, a wave of protest began to grow. The protests took place on the 20th anniversary of the arrival of the Warsaw Pike troops, on the anniversary of Jan Palach's death, on the next anniversary of the arrival of the troops, and also on the anniversary of the founding of Czechoslovakia. But the key demonstration for this video took place on November 17th, 1999, on the 50th anniversary of the closure of Czech universities by the Nazis. It was supposed to be a student procession which was to take all the way to Vyšehrad from the university campus in Albertov. The event was approved by the Communist Party. It would seem that nothing serious should have happened, but the procession quickly turned into a demonstration against the Communist Party, and after Vyšehrad it went towards the center of Prague to Vítězslav Square. But along the way, protesters met a police cordon and many students were beaten by batons. There was even a word that student Martin Schmidl had been killed in the process. But later it turned out that no one died, and at that time a member of STB, Ludvík Živčák, was lying on the ground. Why the intervention took place and how the state security leadership relates to the political coup is still unclear. According to Jakeš, it was planned action to overthrow party leadership. He supports this theory by saying that information about the events of November 17th did not reach him until November 19th. And when he asked Deputy Interior Minister Lawrence why the intervention took place, he did not receive clear answers. But the news of the massacre quickly spread to all corners of the Republic and provoked great protests. November 18th, students and other representatives of culture met in Prague and a general strike was agreed on November 27th. Requests were also made to investigate the events of November 17th. November 19th, leading representatives of the opposition, led by Václav Havel, met in a drama club. They established a political platform called a Civil Forum, OF. Similar movement arose in Slovakia called the Public Against Violence. The presidency of a Central Committee of a Communist Party also met on the same day, and it was decided that the situation was relatively serious. And also on November 19th, the opposition, through the MOST initiative, established contact with Prime Minister Adamec. November 20th, strikes at the university began. Also on this day, the government did a very tactless thing, and it agreed with the political intervention on November 17th, which further outraged society. November 21st, Adamec negotiated with representatives of OF. It was so far promised that the police will not act against the ongoing demonstrations, especially on the Wenceslav Square, that a commission will be set up to investigate the events of November 17th. The next meeting of a Central Committee of a Communist Party on the same day, it was discussed that a counter-demonstration could take place, because if the demonstrators had a great support in Prague, in the countryside, it was the opposite. But due to the fact that Wenceslav Square was already full, this event was cancelled. There was also a consideration about calling of the People's Militia to keep the peace, but due to the Prague organizations of Communist Party, this event was also stopped. Through the upcoming days, the Communist Party continued to lose control. Despite the instruction, the television broadcast a demonstration in Prague, and the National Front began to crumble because ČSS and ČSL began to speak out against the Communist Party. November 24th, a meeting of a UVKSČ took place, where army's intervention was considered. But in the end, it was not agreed. However, it was agreed to resign the Central Committee of a Communist Party. Karel Urbánek became the new first secretary. Furthermore, it was basically just a concession from the Communist Party to the opposition. The Communist Party replaced the Communist Party members in leading positions according to the will of OF. And November 28th, it was agreed that the Communist Party ceased to have the position of a governing party. Marxism-Leninism is not an official ideology. The dissolution of the People's Militia and many other minor changes. OF and VPN were co-opted into the Federal Assembly during December and early 1990s. Gustav Husák abdicated on December 10th. Careerists who had been in large numbers in the party began to change their codes and to move to other parties and groups. And on December 29th, the presidential election took place. Czechoslovakia and later in the Czech Republic until 2012, the president was elected by parliament. OF has already selected a candidate for this position, and Václav Havel became him. To avoid complications, the KSČ deputies, of whom still hold majority in the Federal Assembly at the time, were pressured by the new KSČ leadership to vote for Havel. And so, on December 29th, 1989, all the deputies present declared for Havel. Socialism has fallen in Czechoslovakia. There are several theories as to why and how the Velvet Revolution took place. One of them, now called conspiracy theory, says that the Velvet Revolution took place according to the will of an internal opposition in the Communist Party, which consisted of opportunists and agents of the West. The Communist Party fell extremely quickly, and the very pretext of all this is the intervention of the police against the demonstration on November 17th, which took place not according to the orders of the Communist Party, because the order was not to attack the demonstration. Former capitalists and their pets used ideas of a market socialism and masked with them pure capitalism and prepared destruction of a Czechoslovak industry. In the end of socialism in Czechoslovakia is connected with the internal situation in the Communist Party. There are many similarities between February 1948 and November 1989. In 1948 and also in 1989 a general strike played a major role. There were also major manifestations and the government experienced an internal crisis. But what makes these 2 years significantly different? In 1948, revolutionary forces came to power. In the 1989, contra-revolutionary liberal forces came into power. In 1948, the communists had the great support of the population through the country. In 1989, those on the communist side were pushed and could do nothing to resist. The very revolutionary party of Gottwald and Zápotocký during the 60s and the 70s and the 80s swept from within and broke away from the people, and the capitalists regained power. And now, after 30 years, the capitalist world is drowning again in its own crisis. And the only thing that can move society forward is socialism and communism. I wish for communists around the world to learn from the mistakes of the former Eastern Bloc, and with this knowledge, raise the idea of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin and others to a new level. Only such fury will win the hearts of millions.